What do you think is the main result for Russia following your visit to Myanmar and Cambodia? We have reaffirmed our full support for maintaining the principles used by the 10 nations for decades to build up cooperation and interaction formats based on equality, respect for each other's interests, and decision-making exclusively by consensus. The mere fact of this year's public statement by NATO on its global ambitions, everyone had suspected them of this before, though, to have a dominant military political role in the region marks a serious qualitative change in the situation. There have been a number of sparking statements today, primarily regarding the developments around the Taiwan Strait following the visit by Speaker of the House of Representatives of the U.S. Congress Nancy Pelosi. We have heard fairly strong reactions from our Chinese partners whom we support. In response, the US and Japan stated that this is none of the PCR's business and that the policy they had declared on supporting the One China principle does not mean Beijing's permission is required to visit Taiwan. It is odd logic. And of course, the topic of Ukraine came up. Our US colleagues and some of their closest allies did not say anything new. We reminded them how things had been unfolding and what a disruptive and provocational role the US and NATO had been playing for many years to create a situation in which living in Ukraine would become unbearable for Russians. Anything connected with the Russian language, Russian education and media has been banned in Ukraine. Kiev was derailing the implementation of the Minsk agreements with acquiescence from Washington and Brussels. Ukraine was being flooded with weapons. They had plans to build military and naval bases aimed at containing the Russian Federation. Antony Blinken repeated the mantra today that states' territorial integrity and sovereignty are sacred. The US Secretary of State referred to the UN Charter for the first time in many years. Until recently, the Americans spoke exclusively about the rules-based order rather than international law or the UN Charter principles. Obviously, now they appeal to the UN Charter so as to justify subversive actions the US has been taking to create a threat to Russia from Ukrainian territory. It would make sense to speak about that again, citing new examples of not only arming Ukraine, but also the US military's direct involvement in targeting the weapons systems against the Russian Federation and civilians in Donbass. The traditional UN General Assembly will be held in September. Will Russia be represented at it? Or will Western sanctions create an obstacle to the attendance of the Russian delegation? As for the level of our presence, whether it will be a delegation from Moscow or our American colleagues will manage, in the spirit of their love of freedom, to forbid the delegation from attending, time will tell. The United States, as the host country of the headquarters, has a legal obligation to the UN and all members of the organization to do everything so that any member state of the UN can normally and comfortably participate in the work of all bodies of the organization. The United States shirks this duty. Recently I sent a letter to the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who is obliged to seek decent behavior from the host country of the headquarters. The agreement between the United Nations and the United States on the location of the UN headquarters provides for the Secretary-General to initiate arbitration in the event that Washington violates its obligations. For several years now, the Secretary-General has for some reason been unable or unwilling to exercise this right. We remind him that he has such a right and should not just keep it in the pocket. It needs to be actively used. We began to issue reminders of this right when the Obama administration, in the last weeks of its time in the White House, criminally confiscated diplomatic property from us, including the premises where our mission to the United Nations was located. Hopefully, the United States will understand that for its own reputation in the international arena, it is important to avoid the impression that Washington is afraid of discussions, trying to block channels for disputes, discussions and negotiations for countries whose position is contrary to the American one. Truth is born in argument. Today I gave examples of the Americans creating associations in the Indo-Pacific region, as they call it, in which only like-minded states can participate and no one will object to the United States. Such formations are doomed to megalomania and have no prospects, since they will not be able to reflect the entire range of opinions existing in the region. The same goes for the United Nations. We don't want any UN member country to experience any problems with fully participating in the activities of the organization.